Hello, I'm Tara Palacios, the Director of BizLaunch for Arlington Economic Development.
I'm Sonia Quinonez, Executive Director at SCAN of Northern Virginia.
I'm Alan Abramson, Professor of Nonprofit Management at George Mason University and Director of Mason's Center for Nonprofit Management, Philanthropy, and Public Policy. Welcome to the Arlington campus of George Mason University, and please join us in conversation. This is a tough time for nonprofits in a lot of ways. Nonprofits are, I think, very resilient. There's a lot of energy, a lot of good ideas, but it's also a challenging time for nonprofits. I think that funding is always a challenge for nonprofits, but in this time, I think it's a particular challenge. A lot of nonprofits get, I think, a surprisingly large amount of their funding from government.
Yes.
And this has been a tough time for government. People are concerned about not wanting to pay more taxes, and
it's a threat too of sequestration and things that are happening, so the funding well is kind of drying up.
Right, the federal government has cut back, and that makes it hard for state and local governments. The economy has been up and down, and so government funding of nonprofits, an important source for a lot of the human service organizations, has really not been very abundant, and it's hard for private philanthropy to try and fill that gap. Those are some of the national trends I see. Sonia, do you see that at the local level?
I do.
From where you sit?
I think that state and local governments, I think in particular, although federal too with sequestration, but have been really crunching to try to figure out how they balance budgets. And sometimes it's easier just to take a percentage off of all the nonprofit contracts and then let the nonprofits figure out how they're going to manage with that than to have to cut within government staff. And so. And then we're faced with trying to figure that out, and need has grown in those same years, and so you're trying to do more with less. And I think sometimes we've made decisions to postpone certain things that we could put off for a little bit, but now we're realizing this is sort of the new normal. It's not a temporary dip, and so you have to figure out how you're going to sort of manage long term under those same financial constraints.
Yeah, and I would say even for the last 11 years in Arlington, we had a program where we were doing nonprofit capacity building, and the funding for that, just because of everything else, is not there. So we're trying to come up with creative ways to be able to respond to nonprofits to help them. One of the trends that I'm seeing is that I don't get as many requests for people wanting to start a nonprofit. Whereas years before, we were hearing from lots of people, I have this passion, I'm hearing some on the social entrepreneurship side, but like the traditional nonprofit startup isn't there because the money's not there to support it because there's no history. And so we're really trying to come up with creative ways to work with nonprofits to help them with their current needs, but with less.
And I would say in some ways that there's a positive side to that, because I think there was a time historically when some of those sort of entrepreneurial social spirit people would find a nonprofit they thought was doing good work and really step in and help them. And then there was sort of this trend where everybody wanted to do their own thing, right?
That's
and so
right.
there was this proliferation of small nonprofits
that
I don't think was necessarily a healthy thing.
Yeah,
Not that any
true.
Individual one was a bad idea, but it sort of created a brain drain on some level and an energy drain. So I think on some level,
duplication of the same types of areas.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think if there's a slowing in the number of nonprofits being created, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But we definitely still need those people with the spirit and that entrepreneurial vision to help as staff or as volunteers, as board members, to kind of help keep that energy driving.
That's true.
One of the challenges that I hear about, and at the university, I guess it's natural, but the question of how to draw talent and young folks into this sector.
Yes.
There have been some studies about how with the retirement of boomers, that there may in fact be a shortage
Yes.
of staff in nonprofits. And the concern is that if nonprofits aren't able to pay very well, then it will be hard to attract people into those kinds of jobs. So, I think there's a lot of thinking and scratching heads and a little bit of worry about how do we recruit and keep talent and
Retain.
promote millennials too, so that they can take those leadership jobs. I don't know whether you guys see that, and
Definitely.
you guys are on the ground doing the work.
Yeah.
And I think it's both. I think it's
Yeah.
the recruitment and the retention. So we struggle to attract the right people sometimes, but we also, I think some of the smaller nonprofits, we sometimes feel like training institutes. Like
Yes.
we'll get those
I
young,
hear
energetic,
that.
passionate people, but then once we've invested in them in developing some of those professional skills and learning, then they become suddenly more marketable, and we don't have the growth ladder to keep them once they're more marketable, and so they move on to other.
Yeah, and we're seeing that as well. One of the things that we are seeing, I do the for-profit as well as a nonprofit program. There are a number of folks that have been inquiring about the benefits corporation, and so really structuring their business because they have a passion around a particular area. And that's really cool, and I'm hearing more and more, whether it's women's issues, low, moderate income, socioeconomic issues. I want to give a certain percentage, or I want to have this part of my business, which is for profit, so I can earn money, so I have that diversification and income stream. But then I really have this passion around this one particular area. And I think that this type of public policy is geared towards the millennials and the folks that are coming up now to create something that's not so boxed in.
That's very popular here
Yes.
among
Yes.
the students here at Mason and elsewhere. The idea of social entrepreneurship, the idea of trying to do good and make some money at the same
Yes.
time.
Yes.
I find a lot of young people want to operate in that space. The hybrid organizations or benefit corporations or L3. Now I think about 25 states have created a new organizational form that for this hybrid space. You know, back up till now, we pretty much forced organizations to be either nonprofit or for-profit. But you find a lot of young folks want to be in that middle space. You know, do good like nonprofits, but also make money like for-profits. And so, you know, more states are recognizing that space, making it a little bit easier for folks to operate there, and as we've said, create new legal designations. But it's interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of energy in there, a lot of good that's being done. I worry a little bit about some of the more traditional nonprofits and some of the activities for which there will never be an earned revenue stream. You know, it's hard. You can think of clever ways to make earned revenue, to earn money for doing a lot of things, but there are some things, you know, that are hard.
That's very true.
I don't know. Do you guys see some of this playing out in the local area?
You know, obviously we're a child abuse prevention organization, and we often have those conversations around, okay, how could we sort of, you know, other nonprofits look to how can we raise funds through our former clients, you know, if you're a hospital or a university. Well, we can't do that. You know, children have no income of their own, abused children even less. So, you know, we have to look at it in a different way. We do some fee-for-service training and exploring, like helping take some of the parent education that we do, you know, with our target population, but also provide it as a lunch and learn on site at a corporate for their employees who are also trying to balance work and family. You know, so I think
that's a good idea.
It is sort of that trying to think creatively. Will that ever fund all of our programming? It absolutely will not. But it's a nice way to have an additional funding stream that sort of helps balance out some of the other more challenging ones sometimes.
And I would agree. I think one of the things that I'm toying and playing around with, and I'm working really closely with our Cultural Affairs Division about how do we create for nonprofits that are in this creative space and make it kind of a for-profit entity or kind of almost thinking as a business, but still loving all the aspects of being a nonprofit. And how do you do that where you're not kind of selling yourself out, but that you have this system over the long term where there's this generated revenue, you're doing what you love, you have passion with it, and you don't feel dirty about it. You know, it's that kind of thing. And so we're looking at ways of doing that, but also nonprofits, traditional nonprofits have key areas where you have the board. You know, there is fundraising. There are these key areas that are unique to them that for-profits don't have. So really being able to do best practices and looking at ways that the board is engaged, that they're cycling off and that you're constantly getting this new stream. I think some of the best practices that nonprofits need to have as part of their toolkit, we can't get away from. So I think that's
the other thing that's really different between a business and a nonprofit that I think sometimes our board members who come from business backgrounds struggle to sort of make the transition is that when you're running if you're making widgets as a for-profit and there's a demand for more widgets, then you can make even more and make more money, right? In my case, when there's more demand than I have the capacity to meet, that doesn't mean that I can expand because I have to do this opposite thing of raising funding in order to be able to do that. So providing more services doesn't necessarily bring in more income. And so it's you have to be much more strategic and work on different levels when you're in a nonprofit.
That's right.
I think that you talk about boards and organizational systems. I think that unfortunately, that's another area where nonprofits are sometimes challenged.
Yes.
That there are lots of well-meaning people who are serving on boards and maybe getting involved in the necessary fundraising. But I think on the whole too, that the sector, that leaders in the sector are worried that nonprofit boards aren't always as on top of things as they could be. Yeah. And more generally, that nonprofits don't have that organizational infrastructure, those systems, the IT system, the accounting system, the HR system that really, I think, is necessary to make organizations high performing. I think in the for-profit sector, we understand that businesses really need to have those kinds of systems in place.
Yeah, that's right.
The problem is in the nonprofit sector, we call that overhead. And no funders want to pay for overhead.
No.
Nobody wants to pay for that important infrastructure. Funders want all the money to go to program. Right.
Don't pay that overhead.
Right. You don't need to fundraise. You don't need to pay for the IT system. You don't need to pay for the office space.
Yeah. When in fact it's incremental.
Right.
You need that.
Right. And so I think you have a new wave of donors who are a little more understanding of that and are prepared to be supportive of that. But there's still. I watched with my class last night the Dan Pallotta TED Talk, which I recommend to everybody if they haven't seen it. He's a powerful speaker, very good speaker. I don't agree with everything he says, but he does make some valid points, I think, about how nonprofits are small and are small organizations trying to address big problems with two hands tied behind their back.
That's a very good analogy.
They don't pay salaries. They don't pay the salaries that they need to recruit people. They don't market their services. They're scared of taking risks, and they don't want to invest in fundraising. And so, all the tools I think that the for-profit sector uses to good advantage, nonprofits feel like, we really can't do that.
We're limited.
Right.
One of the areas that I was looking at, and I'm curious to hear y'all's opinion on this, is crowdfunding as a different source. It's like non-traditional fundraising, because I see it that you've got a great cause, a great call of action, and that people see that and they want to jump in. But I don't see the nonprofits jumping into that space. So I don't know if there are barriers in that field?
I would say there's probably two things. One is a lot of those sort of online fundraising things, there's sort of this new level of nonprofits support people. In fact, there's a new trend toward capacity building, some understanding of that, except that most capacity building funders want to fund consultants. Great, but so we have this burgeoning sort of layer of consultants and people who make their living off of supporting nonprofits instead of as a donation or a volunteer.
Whole other industry, right?
Yeah, and that one is burgeoning much more healthy, I think, than us nonprofits are. And where was I going to go with this? But so all those sort of online fundraising kinds of things, people think are free, but they're not free. Just like volunteers are not free because it takes staff time, which we can't fund because it's not direct services, right? It would be overhead. And you're never sure exactly which, there's a bazillion of them, right? And you don't have time to do them all, so you have to sort of pick and choose. The other thing I think is those still are most sexy if they're for a very tangible direct service, buying a van to deliver meals or whatever. Then you can kind of make a crowdfunding thing work.
See that.
If you're trying to fund the backbone of the organization,
not so sexy.
That's not so sexy, right?
Right.
I find that when you're attracting new donors, you want to sort of offer them something really tangible because there's that trust isn't there yet, right?
Yes.
So the new donors are going to want to sort of buy a crib for a child that doesn't have one, or buy the backpack meals for the child that doesn't have one. And that's visual.
You can
yes,
see
they know
it.
exactly where their money's going, and they're down with that. And what my staff and my board tries to do is that we attract new donors that way, but as donors get involved with our organization, as they know it, as they volunteer, as they meet some of our clients and they begin to build that trust, then we invite them to fund that backbone of the organization. If you want impact, you can't just fund outcomes, right? That outcomes is a sort of a way to start, but if you really want impact, then you want me evaluating our programs. You want me looking at whether there are new models. You want me seeing who we could collaborate with to achieve efficiencies. But that initially takes backbone time or what may be called overhead. If you want us to have an annual audit, because you want to make sure we're doing that takes money. All those things are important to the health of an organization. And if you really want the organization to be impactful and healthy, then that's also a really important thing to fund.
One of the resources that we've been a part of trying to develop in the local area is, you guys may be familiar with it, Connect Northern Virginia.
Yes.
Which is a community platform, and it's a website that has information about some of the community issues, housing, health, education, human services, some of the issues and challenges in the community, as well as some of the nonprofit, as well as a lot of information about the nonprofits who are out there trying to do something about those issues. So we have folks in Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, who have contributed in information for the website and really trying to use it as a vehicle for connecting all the different parts in our community. I think we started with the idea that government, particularly in this area, I think had a large part of the responsibility for dealing with these problems.
Yes.
But we've come to the point, I think, where government is doing what it can. We've come to the point where we realize it's really all parts of the community. Yes. Government, business, nonprofits, philanthropy, really have to work together and connect with each other to do something about the problems in the community. So that's our hope for this very grassroots website, Connect Northern Virginia, that it will provide information for all the different parts of the community to know what's going on and to try and join forces a little bit more to make our very wealthy community a little bit stronger.
Yeah, I would agree. I think when you collaborate and bring together all the various different groups, it's much more impactful versus being disparate and people doing things in silos. Because I think that's the one thing, we all have passion towards different areas, whether it's homelessness, whether it's child abuse, whatever that issue may be. And sometimes people just don't know what they can do in supporting a nonprofit, or do I support the individual, or do I support the organization? But having a clearinghouse of information and having other groups and organizations involved make that even more, make the area strong. I believe.
I think it also plays into another positive trend I think I see is that I think there's more and more a desire among people who want to volunteer to want to volunteer in a strategic way, to maybe share their professional skills on behalf of an organization, to not look at volunteering so much as sort of community service hours, which I don't think is the healthiest, but really looking for meaning. You know, if they're not feeling that sort of meaning and fulfillment, whether they're millennials or baby boomers or someone in between, I think there is a real thirst today for that meaning, and sometimes you get that by volunteering for a passion that a cause that you're really passionate about, but also being able to use sort of skills. And I think that's one of the things you guys are trying to achieve with that too, is help you find where is there that intersection between your passion and your skill set that you bring and some needs in the community.
Because I think a lot of people will say, well, I want to volunteer, I want to help, but they don't quite know how, or like what their expertise or background will bring to the table. And so to have that is priceless.
I know there are some terrific volunteer centers too in the region, and I think Arlington is in transition, but there are a lot of volunteer centers that help connect people to volunteer opportunities. We linked to those on Connect Northern Virginia. We don't want to recreate the wheel with our website, and there are those volunteer centers out there, so we help people point to it. And it actually turns out to be one of the most popular parts of our website.
Oh, wow.
People coming and looking for volunteer opportunities.
And do you know the website off the top of your head? The website address, if people were looking for it?
For Connect North, it's simply connectnorthernvirginia.org.
.org.
That's easy.
So, it's a good community resource, I think.
And does George Mason have students involved in sort of helping that platform be successful?
We do. We have some of our students, and we have a lot of volunteers from the different areas. The Loudoun folks have been especially energized to be a part of it, and it's terrific. It's the Loudoun Chamber of Commerce. It's the Loudoun nonprofit sector. Loudoun Cares is a good partner, as well as some of the funders. The Claude Moore Foundation, the Community Foundation for Northern Virginia is a partner. The United Way has been another partner. Cardinal Bank has really been helpful. So it's a Loudoun County government, Fairfax County government. We've talked to folks in Arlington as well about possibly partnering. So I think obviously I'm biased, but I think it's a good partnership of all the different parts of the community: government, business, the university, the nonprofit sector, to come together, to put the website together, and to try and do the outreach to all those different parts of the community. What are you guys working on in Arlington? I know you really do care deeply about the nonprofit sector here, and what government provide a lot of funding for the sector.
We're still working with our library system in order to maintain a cooperating collection with the Foundation Center. So we're doing a number of events in the upcoming year, from networking to grant seeking. So we're looking at some of these technical skills. But even though we're not doing the capacity building program, we have counselors at our office that have worked in the nonprofit area and worked with a lot of our local nonprofits that can help with technical assistance, any kind of strategy, building if there's branding, or looking at taking a program to the next level. So we're still going to have that in place, and I'm looking to we did a few webinars last year that they were very well attended. I was very happy. We would have over 65 people participate, and then it lives on YouTube, which is amazing. So people can constantly get the information when they need it. So we're looking to do more creative things around that, bringing people out. And just knowing that we're there as a resource, I think is really, really important, because I'm driven by making sure that the areas where government doesn't do as well is usually where the nonprofit sector steps in, and they do it exceedingly well. And so, there are things that government does well and doesn't do well. and then working and engaging. So making sure that our nonprofits have the key tools and resources that they need in order to be successful is paramount, I think.
What are the more popular topics?
Hot topic, anything about fundraising. Board development is huge. I hear all kinds of things about board development, fundraising, and then the other one is grant writing. Because I think the grant writers kind of move around pretty quickly, and so there's always new people that need to be trained. And so it's an area that I get a lot from. Those are my top three. If I could make board members active and engaged and I could wave like a magic wand, I would just do that, because I hear that a lot.
Leadership Arlington too is another great resource in the community. Betsy France, I think, does a great job.
With her onboarding.
Yeah, with doing a lot of seminars for nonprofits. And we're happy to help too. We have about 100 students in our MPA program, Master of Public Administration program, who focused on just on nonprofit management.
I love that.
So they are always looking for internships and then eventually jobs. So please feel free to call on us if you
definitely.
think
I love it.
if we can help with interns.
Of course. And then I would be remiss, the Nonprofit Resource Center with Marymount that they just started, and working with the Arlington Community Foundation. So that is available. I think they're still working on different things, but I will definitely take up that wonderful offer. Thank you.
You know, I was going to come back to that struggle with board member engagement, because I do think that's something funders often ask me about. It's something my peers often complain about when we're being really honest and behind the scenes.
Yes.
But I think that there's some real challenges in this area, because you don't have many stay-at-home parents that you might have had in traditional times or even in other areas of the country who, you know, my mom, she was really involved with a nonprofit without pay because she had that time. And even the people who are in business who I think decades past might have reached a point at which they had a little bit of flexibility in their work schedule and they could sort of take on philanthropic, you know, and those buffers or cushion zones in the for-profit world, I think, aren't there as much. And so the ability to provide pro bono services or to be on a board as part of your workday have kind of evaporated. And so I think board members are really struggling. I find my board members, when they're in the room, they are super engaged.
They're on.
But I know when they walk out, then life takes over. You know, family obligations take over, business takes over,
Juggling.
and with the commutes that we have in this area, people just have really limited time and an information overload. And so I think what we have to really struggle with is how to be strategic in our communications and in what we ask board members to do, so that we're making the most of the limited sort of time and energy and focus that they have.
Yeah, I can see that. That's what I hear a lot. One thing that we did, I serve on a board for a local nonprofit, and one of the things that was really beneficial to me, you know, wearing my board hat, was we did a bus tour of all of the agencies that we serve throughout the year. So I'm an existing board member, and then we'd have new board members. And it was amazing because we did a board meeting on a bus. So hired a shuttle bus and we went around to all the different agencies, the businesses that were funded, and it was amazing to see the work. We talk about the work in these kind of these terms that are up here, but to actually see what we were accomplishing was priceless, and it created even more engagement amongst the board members. And then the new folks could see, and then the old folks weren't as jaded as they used to be, and it's like, wow, we do this. And so then the social media, and then actually letting other people know about the work and having other influencers. I think they invited also some of the investors, and I think that was priceless, something that we learned in one of the training that we had done in the past.
I think it's a creative time for nonprofits in a lot of ways. I think people are open to trying new things, new ways of working. It's a creative time for philanthropy too.